I just want to welcome everybody again, and we're going to continue with the user stories that we were working on last time. Last time we were working on the part where the use case was that we're working in a metadata editor, and we want to extend an entity being edited in that editor with additional information from an external resource, an external authority. And the place that we left off last time was we had just gotten to the place where we were going to start talking about filtering. And we did talk last time about filtering to a specific class. So that's when you limit it to like a corporate name, person name, manifestation, item, expression, those kinds of things. And those have typically been done as subclasses in questioning authority. I'm sorry, sub-authorities in questioning authority to limit to an authority to a particular area. And so where we're starting off today is with filtering by language. And actually need to edit. So we actually, I think we did talk about this just a little bit last time, and it was the splitting it between filtering based on like the context of the item itself. Was it a book that was written in Greek versus I speak Greek, and so I want as much as possible all labels that come back to be in my preferred language, because it will be easier for me to read and confirm that I have the item that I want. So I guess the question is, are these the two things that we need in place for a user story for language?
This is a tough one. I say that because if you do a search, and let's say you do a search in English, you would expect the results to come back to be in English, because that would demonstrate how the search, how your search matched stuff in the system. Whereas if you did a search in English and the results came back in Greek, I'm not sure how the user knows where in the data, in the source data, the hit was made. I don't know if I'm being entirely clear right now, but the bottom line is I feel like there's a mismatch between if you search in English and get results back in Greek, at the risk of making an awful pun, it could be all Greek to the user.
Nancy, I wonder if you could comment on this, because I believe the first item there where the book is written in Greek and I want to see the information displayed in Greek, I believe that you were the one who sort of separated out that filtering by language between these two.
I don't think that, I think it might have been Christine, but I think if you are, well, so I think the idea behind it is basically, I think Kevin kind of said it. If you are searching in Greek, you want your results in Greek. If you're searching in English, you want to see your results in English. And it depends on what you're typing in for your search.
So you want to be able to see it contextually switch based on what keywords you type in, what language.
So if I'm a cataloger and I'm cataloging in Russian in a Cyrillic script, right? Or I'm going to catalog in a non-Roman script, then I want to find out if this thing exists already in a or if I want to find the information in a non-Roman script, I'd like to type it in a non-Roman script and get an exact match. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the thing I'm trying to tease out is like browsers themselves have the ability for you to set a preferred language, which I think is what the second one is addressing. I set my preferred language in my browser to be German, and so consequently I want everything to come back in German. And then the other is like what you're describing, where the resources themselves can be in different languages. And so I want to type into the search field, my preferred language in my browser is still English, but in the search field, I'm typing in something that's in Russian. And I want it to recognize that this is Russian and return, do I want all the descriptive information in Russian or just the title in Russian? So I'm trying to tease out, like, what is it that the cataloger expects?
Oh, so if I were doing a name authority search and I wanted the Cyrillic version of the name or the Arabic version of the name, I would want to type it in. I see. So I'm not really certain. I will totally honest. I'm not really certain, but I would think that if I were cataloging in, let's say I was cataloging in Arabic and I wanted to know if there was an Arabic version of this name, maybe I would want to type it in Arabic to get that back directly. Otherwise, how would I know that there was an Arabic version of the name?
So
I'm not really sure. I don't know that I was the one that teased this out, but I'm not really certain. That would be my best guess at the use case.
yeah, just because this is about works or whatever, you could imagine searching a work lookup using non-Greek terms and still want to filter on Greek works. So like searching for an author, the author's name isn't necessarily Greek, you know, or if you were searching by publisher or something, for works, the filtering by language of resource is really just about making sure the things that come back were written in a particular language. I'm sensitive to the issue that Kevin and Nancy are working through here about if I search in a language, wanting things to come back. But I also think that there's something to be said for being able to plug in some words, whatever language they are, and have things that are just filtered on a particular criteria. It's funny that we're focusing on language here, but maybe, or maybe not funny, but you could imagine countless ways, and I think this is what Rob was saying in one of the early calls. It's there are countless ways that we might want to filter depending on the entity type, language being one of them.
So I'm going to try and couch this in terms of like a user interface, just
Right.
that sort of teases out what we're looking for here. Would you see this as, for particular types of data which may be available in multiple languages, would you see there being a separate UI element that would allow you to filter by language for that particular field? Or, you know, we sort of talked originally about this being sort of automatic. If I type in Greek, I want to see Greek. And so I'm just trying to envision what this would look like to the cataloger. It could be that this particular piece is really complex, and maybe what we need is to, down the line later, tease out some potential UI implications of how this would actually occur and then run it by some user studies. Because the sense I'm getting is that this is really complex to describe. Whereas the second one, where I set my browser's preferred language, that's a little more straightforward. This one, there's so many different situations where it could come up that it might be different for different situations.
Yeah. Do we have a use case here that is, if I search for something, to get back to Kevin's thing about, I search for something, I want to know why I got the match. Do we have that one? Or do we have a use case around that, that whatever the search term is, it's returned?
I'm not sure I completely follow that. We did talk some last time about if you do a search and it's a keyword search, wanting to get transparency in what were the rules that were applied in order to get the ranked results that I get. So how, with what you're describing, how is that, what would be the distinction between that and what you're describing?
I wasn't even imagining something that sophisticated as far as like, mainly just, okay, if I search for canoes and what comes back are paddle boats, and there's like used for I don't know, like boats with paddles, like comes back, wanting to see the variant label or whatever that made the hit.
So when you say that, I kind of think of this one right here,
Okay.
where it's
Yep.
for the results that appear, I want to know which fields triggered the inclusion of those results.
Yeah, and I think so. In I guess what I'm saying is that at least part of the language conversation might be addressed by that.
Okay.
That if you searched for a Greek label would likely come back as yeah, and still not necessarily be super sophisticated. It's just taking some string or matching on some strings and bringing them back.
I do like the idea of being able to filter for the languages. I think that's an interesting way to do that.
The one below.
The language one that we've been talking about, with the idea of being able to say, to filter your results to come back. So to what Kevin was saying, and Kevin, you did make me laugh when you said it's all Greek to me, but poor pun or not. So I think toward that end, so let's say, so oftentimes catalogers don't, or oftentimes, sometimes, at least when I was back in the day cataloging, I was asked to catalog in languages that I didn't know. And so being able to enter a search in a language I do know and filter for a result back in a language I don't know, I would be trusting that I was getting the right thing back. But that idea of being able to filter and say, you know, and just to use a name, you know, I'm looking for Jonathan Swift, and I'm looking for Jonathan Swift in Arabic, and I wanted his name in Arabic, and I don't know Arabic, but I can search it in English and filter the result to come back in, let's say, English and Arabic.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, what you're saying, Nancy. And I think there's a number of sort of sub use cases, I think, that fall into this filtering by language. And it's complex enough that I wonder if we should just leave it with these examples that we've put in, and just note that when we get to the point where we might want to address this particular kind of filtering, that we probably need some user studies to see how do people interact with particular kind of widgets, and get more direct feedback from a larger group of catalogers to indicate how best to handle filtering by language in this particular way. Does that make sense to folks? Because I don't want to get like totally focused in on this particular complex user story unless you guys tell me like this is a deal breaker, we have to resolve this. Then I would say we probably need to get some of the more basic stuff down first, and then come back to something as complex as handling language in this particular way.
Yeah, Maybe one more thing before we move on. So in the Sinopia discussions around lookups for authorities, there, it's been under specified what it is that we would want to look up for works and expressions. And it's critical in expressions, at least, that we would know what language something, like, that's part of the criteria for selection would be, not only am I looking for Hamlet, but I'm looking for Hamlet as translated in French. And so, yeah, we're gonna have to deal with this just on a pragmatic level when we start supporting work lookups beyond just titles.
Yeah, I agree. And there's there's an affinity group for non-Roman scripts, and it might be a good idea to collaborate with them on these language issues.
In Kevin, in the BitFrame editor, or I think Kirk too, Kirk's on the call, language has to show up in your searches, right? The language of expression or work.
I'm not sure how to answer that question. Whatever a user searches, they will get back relevant hits. If they search in Greek, they would get Greek hits back. For the most part, everything we have, or nearly everything we have, is in English with respect to things like subject headings, names, lookups in general. When it comes to related works, I'm not sure how it's done. One of the issues we do have generally is our suggest service does not search variant labels. So if you wanted Hamlet in Greek, and let's just say for the sake of this discussion, there was a C reference or a variant label on the authority for Hamlet that was in Greek. If a user searches using the BibFrame editor, searches in Greek, they won't get that hit because it's not searching variants. I don't know if that helped.
And they can't filter based on field values, so like language of work, when they're doing a work lookup.
That is correct. They cannot do that.
So I think I'm gonna suggest that we go ahead and move on because I think we could spend probably a whole session on this, just given the information that folks have brought up in this short conversation. So I definitely want to keep the filtering by language of the resource on the table, and maybe spend more time on it in the later end of the process because of the complexity of it. Does that work well for folks?
Yes, can I make one comment on what you've typed? It would be good to collaborate with non-Roman script to see how they are handling this. I think it's not so much how they are handling this, but what their use case is for this. Because those are the folks that catalog with non-Roman scripts.
Sure. Thanks for that clarifying. All right, so are there any additional discussions around this particular user story that, as a cataloger, I would like to see results in my preferred language, so that if I'm a native German speaker, I would see results come back in German?
Maybe that this requires there to be German values. So would there be a fallback?
So we can, we can put in place things that pass to the authority, the preferred language, but if the authority doesn't have that preferred language data, then there's nothing we can really do about that. And there's nothing really they can do about that until they have an opportunity to translate their data into more languages. I know that in the work that I've been doing with authorities, that there aren't a lot of authorities that really have their full set of data in multiple languages. There are some, but there are not many.
Right. This is Kevin again. Not to belabor this, so I'm just looking at how all of these are phrased, or not all of them, but a few of them. I want to be able to see search results or filter search results in a specific language. What I'm not clear about is what language they searched in.
So I'm thinking that this particular one, I want to see the search results in my preferred language, would be based on like a browser setting or some kind of data that's transmitted to the authority that says, I want to see results come back in German. So the API itself would have a preferred language parameter that allows you to say what I want to get stuff back in German.
What happens if there's no German?
Yeah, so I think that.
What if there's a hit? What if there's a hit? What if they search in French? There's a hit, but there's no German there's no German label that can be returned.
Right. Then I think they get it back in whatever language, the authority determines that. So as a cataloger, I want to be able to specify my language, and then the authority has to determine how they're going to handle that. So for instance, in Agravoc, they do actually handle languages. And if I type in lait, L-A-I-T, I will get back all sorts of variants of milk, and they will all be in French. And I think that's an excellent representation of how an authority can support languages.
But you searched in French to get that response.
I did. But I don't, but that's the question, like, do we want to go to the level of telling authorities how best to support language? I guess what I'm thinking is, at this point, I want to say, as a cataloger, this is what I want to be able to do. And maybe when we get down to the authority section, then we can talk more about, as an authority provider, I want to be able to allow users to search to tell me they want things back in German and give them back data in German. I'm trying not to overcomplicate this, because I think this one is pretty straightforward. It's like, I set my browser to German and I want to see things come back in German because I speak German. How that happens is really more down on the authority level, to say, as an authority provider, this is how I can provide language.
That sounds like a reasonable way to break it up to me.
I would agree with that. But I also would point out, and I'm looking quickly and I'm not seeing it, I don't see a use case where a user initiates a search in a specific language, and requests a specific, how do I say this? They want to search a specific language.
As in, they type the initial search term in language, like the example I was giving where I typed in L-A-I-T for milk instead of milk.
Right, but you would type in L-A-I-T, but you would also say, I want you to search in French for L-A-I-T. This is probably not a great example, but imagine that word meant something else in a different language. In other words, I guess what I'm saying more broadly is all these use cases or stories right here are talking about when the results come back, and either the cataloger wants to be able to filter them, or they want to see search results in my preferred language. What if I, as the cataloger, want to perform a language-based search?
Right, so it's not only get results back in French, it's limit the search terms that are captured in French.
Or the search scope, yeah.
Yeah, the search scope to, so you wouldn't get, I don't know.
So should I phrase this differently? I have as a cataloger, I want to type in a keyword in French and get results back in French.
And only search values that are French. And where this might be important is certain stop words in articles, like just different.
Yeah, so te in French, T-H-E, accent aigu. That's the one that's often used as an example where you have the versus te.
Right. Language is complex. Let's see. Does this capture it? As a cataloger, I want to type in a keyword in French. The authority only searches values in French and get results in French. And I added the extra note that this may impact stop words and other indexing implementations.
Yes, that captures it.
Okay. And then the one below that is I want to see search results in my preferred language. I'm going to say in here,
Or maybe just defined in settings.
yeah, so let's see, generally set through browser preferred language setting.
Yeah.
Or there we go. So preferred language settings, application settings, or passed as a parameter.
So are we getting in when we're getting into that level of detail? So we just talked about, and I'm sorry, we just talked about breaking out what the application does and what the user wants.
All right, maybe I will take that back out. I want to see results in my preferred language.
Or you know what, put it in a different color or something so that you know to pull it down into the application period later.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you don't lose it.
Okay. Okay. So anything else on that one before we move on? There's a lot of language stuff. I think we'll probably be revisiting this at some point. All right, so the next filtering topic. As a cataloger, I want to be able to filter on specific fields in the authoritative entity. So I want to be able to filter on occupation, resource format, agent, etc.
I'm good with that.
So just I think I just want to point out that I think there's a relationship between this and the language, or filtering by the language of a work or to me, language is just another. I mean, there's all the concerns that we've brought up before, but about what's returned and what you search on. But I can imagine same thing with occupation or format. That I guess maybe a different wrinkle. Sorry, I'm rambling here, but when we say filter, are we saying select? Or are we saying, or like we would actually, the mechanics would be to select a value, or would you be searching values to then filter on?
So the way I sort of envision this one happening would be someone says, they don't just want to search on the keyword humorist. They want to say, I want to search on, like, specify the field occupation equals humorist, or occupation includes humorist. And
Okay.
so it's like an advanced search kind of
Okay.
setup, and you can see being passed to the authority that someone is specifically looking for this value in the occupation field.
Okay. So it would be, go ahead.
No, finish, Stephen.
Oh, I was just going to say, it almost feels like there's a lookup within a lookup that if you're only searching, that's one thing. But if you're searching and then like selecting a value in the advanced, then it feels more like a lookup within a lookup.
I wonder if that's because of using the term filter,
Right.
in
Yeah.
that sort of implies I've gotten back results and now I'm going to limit the results I get back based on these filters. So almost like a facet on the left-hand side.
Exactly.
There's occupation, and I'm going to do a couple of clicks on several different occupations to limit the results once they get back. So
That's a tough one though, because oftentimes those things come from, okay, so two comments. The first is yes, I agree that when you say filter, I always think kind of a faceted list in a sidebar. But on the other hand, those faceted lists in the sidebar come from generally, hopefully, standard metadata vocabularies. So unless you know the term, it may be difficult to get a good, I'm going to use the word filter, to filter well. So there's that comment. And then the other comment to what Stephen was saying about language is I think we have to keep in mind that there's a difference between the language of the metadata and language as a piece of metadata.
Right. Yeah.
right. I think that's part of the reason why language is such a complex thing, because it can fill both of those roles. So I think that second, the question I've added on to this about whether this is a filter after the results occur versus an advanced search where you pass in occupation includes humorist, I think that's sort of an implementation detail. And so I guess actually this is my question for the group. Because there's really sort of two distinct cases here, should we make this 2 lines? One is where you filter after the fact, and one is where you request it in like an advanced search. Maybe I should just break this apart in 2 lines.
Yeah, because then if somebody knows, then they know. If somebody knows the correct terminology, then they know it. And for somebody who doesn't know the correct terminology, they would need to have that kind of faceted filter action.
Oops, I didn't do what I expected. All right, so I have it separated out now as I want to be able to filter on specific fields in the authoritative entity. Maybe I drop that off and make that in search results. This is a filter about results after they are returned. This is a filter of results after they are returned, similar to a facet. As a cataloger, I want to be able to specify in the search limiting results to a keyword in a particular field, e.g. an advanced search that passes in occupation includes humorist.
Yeah, those do feel separate and useful distinctions.
Are you saying they are, or are you asking the question?
No, I'm agreeing, or I'm saying that they are, or to me they are. Like, you,
okay. Yeah. Excellent. I partially talked over you and I wasn't sure I heard you correct. All right, any other comments about those particular two pieces? All right, the next one is, as a cataloger, I want search results to be returned quickly so that I can catalog efficiently. Do we want to put a specific quantitative value on that? Generally seen as sub-second?
I want immediate gratification. I don't know. I don't know. I think they just don't, they don't want it to, they don't want to sit there staring at the computer. They want to know that it's working.
Yeah.
I think is part of what's going on there is something to let you know that the search is working at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been a case that some of the searches that take a long time to return, you need some kind of indicator that something's happening. So I add that. I want search results to be returned quickly so that I can catalog efficiently, generally seen as sub-second results, or some indicator that a longer search is being processed. Does that work?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Next is, as a cataloger, I want to be able to request additional search results if what I'm looking for isn't visible in the current set of search results displayed. So that's pagination. I didn't get it in the first 10, so give me 10 more.
Right, you're going to put pagination in there? Okay.
Yeah, without the pagination, it's like it reads a little bit like try harder.
All right.
That's going to go into the developer section.
Yeah, I think that
as a developer, I want catalogers to try harder to search.
As a developer, I want catalogers to be more patient.
Right.
All right, so the next one, unless there's more comments about pagination. The next one is, as a cataloger, I want to determine whether the entity I'm searching for doesn't exist in the resource that I'm searching.
Oof.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the wording on that. Maybe the authority source. I think it's the. I think this is based on, you know, if it's definitely, is there a way to tell me it's definitely not there? So I'm not paging and paging 100 times, and if it's able to tell me it's definitely not there, is there a way to do that? And I'm going to punt that back to the catalogers to say, is that exactly what was meant by that?
So
Yeah, this feels like trying to prove a negative.
Yeah.
yeah, or saying, or is it just getting a result back that says no result found? You know what, I wonder if what this is going toward is not no result found, but no exact match found.
I was just heading in that direction in my mind. Like if you know if if you feel pretty confident that you know the label, then what happens if if there are no results?
Yeah, because if this goes back maybe to where we talked previously in previous meetings about relevancy and you know, what you're getting, what kind of results you're getting back. So if you're doing a search, so for an example, I had done in, I guess it was, might have been, I don't even know, LC, one of your id.loc.gov things, Kevin, and I put in Rome, and one of the results I got back was Rome, chip, a person, but I was actually looking for a place. So the result is actually, I put in this keyword, I got a result back, but I didn't get the exact, that might not be the best example, but I didn't get exactly what I put in, like, maybe not the best example, but so even though I got results, the result I got was not exactly the result that I entered.
I'm thinking this is a pretty complex request. It's not complex to say there's no exact match found. That's pretty straightforward, because there either is an exact match or there's not an exact match. But to say there's no result found, other than there's no matching results, you know, but that you know because you didn't get anything back. And maybe that's what the intention was. It's like, instead of it spinning and spinning and spinning and you think it's still searching, it wants a particular indicator that says, yes, we have returned you results and there are no results included. And I'm just not exactly sure where the source of this particular request was. So it makes it hard to know how to state it. Because I think the two things of being able to say the search is completed and there were no results, we can do that. Or you were looking for an exact match and there's no exact match found, we can do that. But if you just type in keywords, we can't tell you for sure that the term you really want to find is not in the source. It's just the particular keywords you used to look for it didn't find it. And we can't say definitively, because the providers of the authoritative source don't actually know exactly what you're looking for. And so there's no way for us to say that it doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's more complicated than I thought. And this might be also something that, so again, I didn't do this. I didn't enter this, and I hate being categorized as a cataloger because I haven't been a cataloger for many years, but I wonder if this was one that Christine put in, and it might be worthwhile pinging her, because I'm assuming she's not on the call or she would have spoken up already, and seeing if she can clarify if she did indeed enter this.
Yeah, you can imagine like you're searching for genre forms and you don't see anything for the thing you need to say this thing is. So this thing's K-pop. I'm sure K-pop exists by now, but so K-pop doesn't exist in my genre vocabulary. I need to create it. Like, you can understand why you would need to know that it doesn't exist yet.
I definitely understand the desire to know that it doesn't exist. I think the challenge is how to know for sure that it doesn't exist, or you just didn't search in a way that brought it up.
Right.
I think
Like,
that's really a challenging thing to do.
So you know what we did, so we have a cataloger, Karen Detling, whose name is she is actually in LCNAF. However, every time we looked up her name, we did a lookup for her name in Sinopia, we never got a result. We never found her. So what we ended up doing was going directly to id.loc.gov, looking her up in id.loc.gov, and then we found her. So maybe part of this is that how much spoon feeding is reasonable, right? So is it reasonable to say that if it doesn't come through in this intermediary tool, that this API, which is an intermediary tool, do you just say, okay, it's not there? If you really want to confirm that it doesn't exist, you know, take the extra step and go directly to the authority instead of using, you know, and definitively confirm that it's there or it's not, rather than so again, how much spoon feeding does the API need to do? And what can you reasonably expect to say to a cataloger, you know, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to, you know, go to the source and look this up to confirm that it doesn't actually exist.
All right, so I did put a note about that because I think this is a pretty complex ask here to state definitively that something does or does not exist. So I did put in the part about it perhaps need to go to the original source to confirm that there. Does that seem reasonable? And we've got a ping in there for Christine for her to take a look at it as well.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Yeah.
All right, so if that, I guess I have this blank line here because in case there's another cataloger story that isn't in there, if someone has one right now, we can add an additional story, but if other folks think of things later when they review it, they can add something as well. Otherwise, we move on to the part for developers. So the first one is, as a developer, I want one field in the authoritative entity to be human readable, a meaningful representation of the entity that can be displayed to users to identify the entity for selection. I think this particular use case came up specifically for authorities like ISNI because they do not have a human readable field associated with their results that they return. And that makes it challenging because if I give you a bunch of ISNI URIs, it may be very challenging for you to select the right one unless you just already know what that URI is. Are there any developers on the call besides me?
Me and Kevin.
I'm here. I got no problem with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Jeremy or Justin, are either of you guys here?
No, they're not on. No.
Nope. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So not a developer, but so my question is about the difference between an identity management source and an authority source. right? So if you go to id.loc.gov, you are generally looking for an authority. You are looking for a label that that is standardized, that everybody's going to use as a label, hopefully, for a human readable description of this let's just say person. But if you go to ISNI, you're not going to ISNI to get a label. You're going to ISNI to say, this is the identifier for this person, regardless of what label you use. So those to me are two different kinds of sources. And so that's why you don't necessarily get a label from ISNI, because ISNI is not going to give you a standardized label that you can use in description that everybody else is going to use. It is simply saying this URI identifies this person, regardless of what standard label you use for this person. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it seems to me that this use case is asking for an authorized access point for everything, and that it be meaningful, which we know authorized access points aren't meaningful, aren't often enough information to be meaningful. They're just unique.
I see this question in part being a little, or this story or this use case being a little bit about whose responsibility is it to come up with a clear, meaningful label.
That's exactly right.
To your point, Nancy, I would argue that ID does both. It gives you the label that you can use if you were cataloging a MARC record, but it also gives you an identifier. ISNI gives you the identifier for an entity, and you can request details about that entity, first name, last name, other stuff. But it's up to you to craft the quote-unquote display label. So anyway, I see this question as being, whose responsibility is it to create a human readable, meaningful label? Is it the service providing the information or the consumer?
So is there a distinction then in an API service? Should there be a distinction in an API service for an authority service, for doing a lookup in an authority where you're going to get an authorized label, versus doing a lookup in an identity management system? And I agree with you, Kevin. You guys have both, because you've got those RWOs and you've got your authorities, and so should there be a distinction when you're using APIs that says you can look up you can look up this person to get for identity management here, and you can look up to get an authorized label here? Do the APIs need, does there need to be something in the, it's not necessarily in the API, but I guess it's in the user interface to distinguish what it is you're looking up?
So I would think I would like to punt this question to next time and just start at the developer section. We have like 1 minute left. And with Justin and Jeremy not here, and they are primary developers in this area, I think it would be good to sort of postpone this, especially since we don't have much time left anyway. And I think these are all good questions you're asking, Nancy. I think I will just put in that from my perspective, the challenge is if I'm passing through information to an editor and there's a cataloger sitting on the other side, if all they get back are a list of ISNIs, are they going to be able to select the correct one? Is there information there that allows them to disambiguate? So if there is no label that would tell them the name that's associated with that particular ISNI ID, is that even useful to an end user?
So then the differentiation is you're getting is between an authorized label and just a label.
Just something that allows the user to make a correct selection. What they want is the ISNI, but what they need to select the correct ISNI is some kind of human readable label that allows them to make that selection. Because otherwise ISNIs are just numbers, and they're unless you know the ISNI, there's nothing there to help you distinguish between various ones.
Okay, well, maybe then I'm just reading more into this than there is. That's certainly possible. It just seems to me that there's a difference when you're talking about what kind of label you're talking about.
I would argue to remove the word authoritative from the first sentence.
Okay.
That was the original sentence. The second sentence also has the word authoritative in it, but it was added as a result of this conversation. But I think what we're talking about here, at least from the developer standpoint, is a human readable label for an entity.
Yeah, it doesn't actually say that.
That makes more sense.
It doesn't actually say that the human readable label is authoritative. It says, I want one field in the authoritative entity to be human readable, meaningful representation of the entity that can be displayed to end users to identify the entity for selection.
So I know we had this discussion last time about entity and resource and stuff like that, but would it make more sense if it was, I want one field in the resource being searched to be a human readable label?
You know what, I'm just looking at the time and it is after the hour. So I think let's just leave it where it is for now. And we will start off with that one when we come back next time. And we can tighten up that language and make sure we get it in a way that works for everybody.
Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you, everyone.
Lynette, thanks
Okay.
very much.
See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.